So since the astronomical rise and kind of fall of Greg Doucette, and also the guys like Remington James, and there's a guy called Ethan, I can't remember his name, and Exercise for Cheat Meals, all these guys, volume eating is becoming incredibly popular. People are eating huge amounts of food with tiny amounts of calories. And because of this, I'm hearing people say that this is just going to lead to stomach capacity expanding. You are going to need more and more food to feel full because your stomach capacity is going to get larger and larger as you stretch it out. Just like taking drugs, just like caffeine, just like alcohol, you build up a tolerance to it. And they're saying that you build up a tolerance to food volume so that the same amount won't make you full anymore. I've heard this a lot and people seem to just kind of go with it. Probably because it does make logical sense and they've probably somewhat experienced it themselves. But I've never actually seen any information proving that this is something that happens. So I wanted to look into this and see if it's bullshit or not, and maybe it could be reversed. You could use it to shrink your stomach capacity by fasting. I've heard people say that dieting shrinks their stomach capacity, so people that used to be really overweight can't get overweight again because they just can't eat like they used to because their stomach shrank. And again, is this bullshit or is this true? And could we potentially use this to make dieting phases easier by doing something like fasting? I didn't know, so I wanted to look into it for today's video. First off, we are tackling the effect that volume eating has on stomach capacity. And to be honest, the information I could find on this is pretty sparse and lackluster. According to Healthline, who are increasingly not reputable, actually, I've found, frequently expanding the stomach capacity will allow for it to be more easily expanded in the future. I guess that would reduce the discomfort that you feel for the expansion of your stomach, and that in turn would lead to an increased capacity because you get less discomfort. But they also provide no evidence or research for how this happens, how long it happens for, how long the effect lasts for. Is it permanent? Is it temporary? They don't say, so they probably don't know. Other information such as Quora, which we all know are full of scientifically researched, evidence-backed information. On Quora, they made the really good point that competitive eaters have expanded their stomach capacity by training for their competition. And in essence, isn't this the same thing you are doing when you are repeatedly eating crazy high volume foods every single day to feel as full as possible? You're essentially training yourself to be a competitive eater, no? Another interesting bit of information I found would be that the only way to actually cause growth of your stomach, after you're already fully grown anyway, would be taking growth hormone. And if that's true, then that is good news for volume eaters who feel like they've gone too far with their volume eating, because it seems that any damage they've done would be temporary because there's not been actual growth happening. So that is quite a lot to pick apart. There doesn't seem to be any actual research on this. Of course, if you know any that I couldn't find, then please drop me a link in the comments. But with a lack of science-based information, that leaves us with anecdote and reasoning. So yeah, it's true that competitive eaters do train themselves to be able to eat more and more food as time goes on, and they do this through eating very high volumes of food or very high volumes of liquid. But the thing is, competitive eaters, just like bodybuilders, are genetic elites. The top bodybuilders are genetic elites of muscularity and conditioning, and professional eaters are genetic elites in how much they can eat. So they already naturally have a huge stomach capacity. So it's probably not that they're actually training themselves to increase stomach capacity. It's more that they are developing their ability to tolerate really stretched stomachs and deal with that discomfort. And when it comes to Healthline's idea of it becoming easier to stretch the stomach capacity the more frequently you do it, it kind of makes sense. The stomach is a muscle, right? So by regularly stretching it, you'd think it would get better at doing that, specificity. But then just like any other muscle in your body, they just get super tight again really quickly if they aren't stretched for a short amount of time. Like, just look at any guy's hamstrings ever. Overall, I basically think that looking into the details of whether volume eating has a physiological effect on your stomach capacity is kind of pointless, for now at least, anyway, because there's no information out there to be found. What I do think is important to look at though is the behaviours around volume eating, the psychological rather than the physiological. If you eat a sandwich every day for lunch for the next year, then a sandwich is a normal sized meal for your stomach, your brain and your body. It's lunchtime, you eat a sandwich, you're happy. But if you eat an enormous salad, 3 sandwiches and a protein ice cream every lunchtime for the next year, then now that enormous salad, 3 sandwiches and protein ice cream are a normal meal for you, your stomach and your body. So when it's lunchtime, you eat all that and you're happy. But in that second situation, is your stomach capacity larger? Maybe. What we know is actually different between the two examples is your psychology around what a normal sized meal is. And once you are used to a certain size of meal, going down to anything else, whether that is realistic and a normal size to anyone else, it's going to feel like less to you. So I think that the dangers of volume eating are more psychological than physiological. I don't really think it's doing much to your stomach capacity. I think it's doing something to your brain. That's just my thoughts anyway. But there does seem to be some more information, some more interesting and promising information out there on shrinking stomach capacity. I wonder why. It's almost like people care more about losing weight than they do gaining weight. So now, talking about fasting to reduce stomach capacity. Is it possible? Well, WebMD has an article named 9 interesting facts about your stomach, and to be fair, I was kind of surprised, but one of these facts about the stomach touched on the ability to shrink it, and I think they actually worded it really well. Basically, once you're an adult, the size of your stomach is set, and you're not going to change that unless you have some kind of surgery. So eating less isn't going to shrink your stomach because it's the size it is. However, what can be changed is your appetite. They termed this an appetite thermostat. I love this because just like a thermostat or a dimmer switch, we can do things to turn your appetite up or turn your appetite down. And this is literally going right back to the behaviours things I was talking about with volume eating. All of this seems to be psychological rather than physiological, and I could have seen that coming, to be honest. So I continued reading about this and I found a lot of information supporting it. Then I found an article on Medium, which again we know is full of fact-based good information. And this Medium article gave me the information that the sharp pain that you feel when you're hungry, that's known as hunger pangs, is actually the muscle of your stomach contracting. They then say that, I quote, "When you fast, your stomach shrinks." Now, I don't want to strawman anyone, but I think they are talking about it shrinks in the long term, not as in the short term whilst you're fasting. And I personally think that that's bullshit. Moving on. Probably the most credible, trustworthy source of information I found here is on PubMed, and that could still be brought into question. But anyway, I found a study named Reduced Stomach Capacity in Obese Individuals After Dieting. Sounds promising. And this was really interesting because they actually found a 27% reduction in gastric capacity in those obese individuals when dieting, compared to a control group which weren't calorie restricting. So this would then suggest that you actually can reduce your stomach capacity. However, this wasn't through fasting, it was just a calorie restricted diet. So that means that any benefit to stomach capacity was done through losing weight itself, not fasting. So in summary here, there isn't really a lot of information about expanding your stomach capacity in the short or long term when it comes to volume eating. There was just the anecdote of competitive eaters and the people who have and are excessively volume eating. But at the end of the day, it really just seems to come down to habits and behaviours, what you actually see as a normal amount of food. The amount that you always eat is the amount that your body will come to expect. So train yourself to eat less and you'll have a smaller appetite. It's as simple as that. When it comes to reducing stomach capacity via fasting, it does seem to be possible to reduce your stomach capacity, but that isn't due to fasting. That seems to come from just calorie restriction and weight loss in general. So you may be able to reduce your stomach capacity, but that's not going to be done through fasting. That is going to be done through overall weight loss. Fasting is one way to achieve that, but it is not going to cause it solely. Aside from that, behaviours still absolutely come into play from that, because reducing your overall volume stomach capacity and reducing your appetite are two completely different things. Your stomach capacity might be smaller than your appetite depending on how much you're used to eating, or it could be the other way around. So nothing really conclusive here, but I did actually find it really interesting doing this research, because I am hearing more and more people say, including my clients, say that in the long term have they messed themselves up by volume eating. And being somebody that's done a lot of volume eating myself, I was kind of thinking, have I actually shot myself in the foot here? So hopefully you've found it interesting as well. The top link in the description will take you to Progressive Physique Coaching, my online coaching company, or you can email me personally on ashmaypt@gmail.com for any questions that need answering. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and until next one, see you later guys.